couple of different theories that may work, but I feel like that may be one to really look into.
Yeah, but you know what, though? I mean, I think you're onto something because there is Marxist analysis, right, which makes a similar argument as it relates not only to that, the controlling of resources, but the controlling of ideas in a given society. It's referred to as the ruling force of society. The elites generate and develop the ruling force in society with respect to ideas. In that regard, they control the populace because they control the flow of information and the control of ideas. The flow of ideas, I should say. What do you think about that?
I think that is just it all boils down to who's in charge. Some people want to be in charge.
Okay.
And I think from that, it forms so many other issues.
Yes.
Someone has to be on top. And because we can't look at it as, for whatever the reason, we have a hard time dealing with equality and equity.
Oh, wow. Yes.
As human beings.
Absolutely.
We have a hard time with seeing someone, meeting them from eye to eye, I guess is the best way I can put it, because someone wants to be above.
Yes.
And in order to be above, you have to have someone beneath you.
Wow.
And most people do not want to just bow down to you. So in some way, shape, or form, whether it's your money, whether it is your perceived power, whether it is a threat of violence, whatever you can do to get them to bow down, and I'm doing air quotes for those who can't see, but whatever it is you can get them to do to give you that authority that you seek.
Wow.
And so oftentimes, some people do not have a price, so you can't buy them.
Yes.
However,
they're dangerous.
I think
they're
that
dangerous to power structure.
Absolutely. And so when you cannot purchase a person's I'll say that.
Yes.
So when you cannot purchase a person, then what other way is there to do it? If I can't scare you, then I'll scare everyone else around you, and they'll bow to me.
Wow.
I'll take your power away that way. I'll get power that way through violence.
That's interesting because that of course happened in the enslavement era, whereby you would take the biggest, strongest man, the most influential man in the community of Africans, and then you would whip that person and beat that person into submission, and what that would do is engender fear amongst the collective group at that time. So if they're able to do this to person A, who is the strongest person, most influential person in the community, then persons who might not be as influential as he is or she is will bow down to the powers that be, so to speak. Okay, I can see that, absolutely. It's been a practice, and that practice still ensues to this day.
And then I think other forms of violence that happen would be once you have, I guess, that established power, then you have those people that are under you, that they have to live an everyday life with one another. And sometimes when resources appear or resources are, you're told that resources are not plentiful, then you have those who will do whatever they need to do to get those resources.
Absolutely.
Because it's like someone's going to be without, why does it have to be me?
Okay. And so now, so we're backing into this debate here, because human beings are social creatures.
Yes.
Would you agree?
I agree.
So we live in community.
Yes.
Although we do have individuals, we do have isolated persons, isolated groups who live in obscurity, right? They live off the grid, if you will, right?
Yes.
However, since we are social beings, then we live in community. So you cannot have community without government. You follow me?
Yes.
So we begin to develop a social system, a social, political, economic structure which governs the land, which governs the people, which governs the territory, right?
Right.
So this takes us back to your Marxist idea that there's a ruling material force in society. And the ruling material force are the ideas that the elites, right, convey to the masses of the people. Because they control the resources, they control the water, they control, well, they don't really control the land, or the air. But they think they do. but they control the resources in the land.
It doesn't matter if they really control, as long as they can get you to believe they control.
Oh my goodness. It's the Jedi mind trick all over again. But here's where we're going with this, right? You said something a couple of minutes ago which triggered this thought in my mind. So now you have the establishment of the criminal justice system once we have developed government, so to speak. And we have a guiding philosophy. You know, we live in a capitalistic society and so forth, right? And so the point that I'm making here is, given the fact that we live in a capitalistic society, then money plays a very important role in the society. Profit.
Absolutely.
You know, the establishment of profiteering is very important, because some people would argue that, well, in a society such as ours, you're going to need persons who go to jail, who go to prison to further fuel that system.
Well, when you privatize it, yes, you will need that. Actually, there have been cases where prisons that have been privatized, the state has made agreements to have X amount of people in those prisons. And so you have the people that own those prisons who look to the state to keep their agreement that you said you were going to give us X amount of prisoners. And so now you have to hold true to this. And so sometimes you look at unfair sentencing and things of that nature that happen as a result of states having to fulfill obligations.
Wow. So Candice, with your point then, is unfair sentencing a form of violence?
Absolutely.
Is it?
Yes.
So in other words, we're positioning a person into servitude, into the prison industrial complex.
Right. According to the 13th Amendment, it is slavery, because the 13th Amendment does say no one will be a slave or be property unless they're in prison. So.
Wow. So wait a minute. So we have. I thought that we were supposed to look up to these persons who are the rulers of a given society.
I think what happens is, well, and we can only deal in America where this is concerned.
Sure.
I think what happens is that we have forgotten, because you used the term, we are to look up to them. I think that we have forgotten that
I was being somewhat facetious.
I got you. But a lot of people really feel like we're supposed to look up to them. We've forgotten that we, the people, are actually in charge. That we are their bosses and they work for us.
Yes.
So we get tricked into saying things such as, well, they make the laws and they're going to do whatever they want. No, they're going to do whatever you require of them. They have to do, essentially what the majority would like done. Obviously, can't do what everybody wants done.
Yes.
And so I think that sometimes we get a little lost in that. And again, perceived power. We give away our authority.
Wow. That's a great point, right? In keeping with your assertion there was a book. It's either referred to as The Problem of Democracy or The Crisis of Democracy, right? And get this, Candice, here's the point that the author of that book is making. What they're maintaining is that the problem or the crisis of democracy, going back to the 1960s and the Civil Rights Movement, is that we have these persons who are not power elites, they're not a member of the ruling class, who are redirecting the focus of American domestic policy and foreign policy. Hence, the crisis of democracy. What do you think about that? The idea that you have the elites, whom you made reference to per the opening of our show, who really have this idea that they know best. They know best. They are the ones who are supposed to lead. They are the intellectuals. They are the scholars and whatnot. They are the persons who are supposed to put forth this idea, and we're supposed to quietly and sheepishly follow them. What do you think about that? The problem or the crisis of democracy. Because we have some intellectuals who they deem as being value-based intellectuals. You're not a number cruncher. You're not merely a cog in the wheel, so to speak, of the system. But a value-based intellectual is like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was he was considered to be a value-based intellectual by these persons. What do you think about that?
I think it's an interesting concept for sure, and then I also think it's how you choose to use, I guess, your influence on people.
Okay.
I think the problem comes in when you do look at people such as a number cruncher or just a drone.
Yeah.
That
working
is a
for the
huge
system.
Problem for me. Yes.
Working for the political, the social, the economic, the judicial system. You're supposed to be a keg that happily plugs into the system.
Right. But I think, though, if you also think about it, you made me think of another really interesting point.
Okay.
Is when you have those people who are in charge,
okay,
then they are able to influence those kegs, if you will.
Okay.
Air quotes again for people who can't see it.
Absolutely.
They're able to influence those kegs to believe that, again, there are limited resources.
Yes.
Or that while we're on top and we have all of these things,
yes.
You too, even though they don't ever plan on letting you get there one day, can be one of us. And so
yes.
I think that mindset perpetuates violence as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you have all these people, crabs in a barrel, if you will, fighting for crumbs
yes.
or fighting to pull the next person down.
Yes.
I think then you run into where we lose focus. And I think one of the things you run into with that, that it starts a class war, if you will. But the crazy part is the war happens between the people that are in the same class.
Yes. Yes.
For the 99%. The 99% are fighting each other as opposed to the 1%, or as opposed to seeking out equality or equity
yes.
for said things. And,
yes.
and that's when you're able to get people into certain mindsets that racism, things of that nature.
Absolutely.
Because it's, well, you don't have it, but at least you're not that color not having it. When the real focus should be, you don't have it either. So how do you gain that thing? But they're so willing to take down the person who is literally in the same boat as them.
Absolutely. So it's the game of divide and conquer.
Mm-hmm.
This idea of driving a wedge between these classes of people
yes.
who perceive that they're different, but they have more in common with one another than their differences. Yes. In other words, man is man,
yes.
woman is woman, people are people.
Yes.
Wow. Wait. So why is it that we fall for that trick then? Why is it we fall for that trick?
I think because sometimes it's just easier to go along the lines of being better than, rather than to have to accept the reality of what you do not have.
Okay.
I mean, it's not easy to be in a place where you are in need of a resource and not have it.
Okay.
And so sometimes the best distraction is, I may not have it, but I'm
yes.
still better than them, because I think it's a self-esteem thing, to be honest with you.
Really?
Yeah. I think it works because it plays on the psyche of,
yes.
well, yeah, you're lowly, but you're not as lowly as them. Yeah.
So really that goes back to the Bacon Rebellion, because remember a couple of weeks ago we made reference
yes.
to the Bacon Rebellion and whatnot. Before America was a nation, America was a colony of Great Britain.
Right.
And of course you had African indentured servants as well as European indentured servants, and they began to see over time that they had something in common. Though one person was black, the other person was white, so to speak, those persons had limited resources. They were serving or living out their lives as serfs, as indentured servants. However, there was a ruling class that was oppressing both groups. However, as you had black people, well, Africans and Europeans who were beginning to work together, coalesce together, whatnot, as they were looking at the land space, socially, politically, and otherwise, then you had persons from the ruling class who began to drive a wedge between the two groups. And that has been an issue ever since then, and it's still an issue even to this day. And we saw that play itself out in the most recent presidential election. The game of divide and conquer, right? How you had one group or one political party that was playing this game of divide and conquer, and they were using the Southern strategy, which has become part and parcel of their political playbook. What do you think? What do you think about that?
Go ahead. I'm just looking at Facebook.
So my point, I think, in addition to that, this whole idea of divide and conquer and empower, so-called power elites driving a wedge between two groups who really have more in common than not.
Right.
How can we? What would cause us to be able to see through the charade? Right? How can we foster or bring about a mindset that would allow us to see that we have more things in common than we don't have in common?
I think that with certain people, with most people, I think that if you present facts to them.
Hold on. We live in an era now.
Cognitive dissonance is real.
We live in an era now where people are refuting facts. They're refuting data, even if the data is factual and actual. They refute the truth. What is truth? What is truth? I can name my own truth. I can deem my own truth. I reject your truth because I have my truth. Forget your truth. Forget that truth. My truth is the only truth that matters. And that's the era that we're living in right now. What do you think about that? Like fake news, the era of fake news.
It's got you saying that.
I'm just saying.
Don't join it.
No,
Don't join.
I'm not turning. I'm not turning.
All right.
I promise you. But even a broke clock is right twice a day.
Not unless you are the absolute brokest clock on the planet, and that seems to be in operation right about now. No.
but we're joking and we're saying this tongue in cheek, but there's a serious undercurrent to those ideas, right? Because America is a very, very divided nation.
Yes.
Right? And as we pointed out a couple of weeks ago, whereas some people argue that since the Trump administration has come into power, we have become more divided. However, you assert that what has happened is that they really have shined a light on just how divided we've always been for quite some time.
Absolutely. I keep trying to tell you, it's like looking in a mirror. Unfortunately, like you said, what happens with people who want to present their own facts, we live in a narcissistic society. So sometimes looking in the mirror is a beautiful thing to some people. Whereas others see it and go, this is unbelievably ugly. I do not think that we are faced with anything any more different than we've been faced with in American history. I don't believe that we are. I believe the difference is because it would appear that rights were given that were not given to certain members of society before, they somehow allow themselves to believe that things were different, when the reality is, how can I put this? The reality is the things are still the same. Now they just use more legal methods of doing things. We'll stick something in a law, or we'll, and again, that's not even that different either, because slavery used to be legal. So I just think the more things change, the more they say the same.
I think you're onto something here, but I want to lift up an idea that was put forth by a guy by the name of Samuel P. Huntington. And Samuel P. Huntington was a professor. I think he was a professor of history, political science, and whatnot at Harvard University. And he wrote a book entitled The Remaking of the Global Order. And he asserts, I'll cut to the quick here, he asserts that if America, now this book was published back in 1996-97. He made the assertion that at that time, that if America is not careful, America will become a cleft nation. Let me say that one more time. He said that if America is not careful, because he was looking at...
Now, when you said we'll become a cleft nation, what do you mean by that?
A cleft nation essentially is a divided nation, right? Let's talk about some of the characteristics of a cleft nation. First, Mr. Huntington maintains that in order for a nation to potentially become a cleft nation, you have to have a certain degree or a certain amount of diversity. In other words, you have persons who hail from different civilizations, right? We got that. However, he also maintains that it is a quest for power and rulership, whereby one group, this takes us back to our earlier assertion here, whereby one group wants to be the dominant group socially, politically, economically, and otherwise, and that group wants to control the resources of the given land space, right? Check. We got those tendencies or characteristics as well. And he was saying that what adds fuel to the fire is this idea that, and it's not an idea, it's reality. You have the browning of America that is taking place. So the demographic trends point to the fact that you have increased numbers of African Americans, Latinos, Mexicans, Asians, etc. And we talked about this in our first show with regard to the Trump effect, and how at the same time, whereby you have the rise of Donald Trump, the rise of nativism is kicking in as well. And this is not only relegated or limited to American society, but this is something that's happening throughout the Western world. We can go over to Europe right now, whether it's you're talking about England, France, Germany, even Eastern European nations such as Russia and whatnot have this rising tide of fascism. In Greece, you have this rising tide of fascism taking place and whatnot. And part of it is a knee-jerk reaction or response to the shifting demographics that are also occurring there, because you have persons who are immigrating from Africa, from the Near Eastern world and whatnot, from Asia, who are leaving war-torn countries that are rife with civil unrest, and now they're trying to make a better life for themselves in Europe. whether it's England or whether it's France or whether it's Germany, whether it's Italy, whether it's Greece or wherever, right? So now you have Europeans who are beginning to push back against that. What do you think about that? But let me finish. But Mr. Huntington said that if America is not careful, this is why the first night I made the statement that we need statespersons. You know, we got to get away from this narrow, myopic viewpoint, this clannish viewpoint that the only thing that matters is my group. Because you don't live on this earth by yourself. You don't live in this country by yourself. I wish I had a witness here. Let me get off my soapbox for a second. Do we have any callers?
The whole time you were talking, the only thing I was thinking was, why can't we get over skin color? Why can't we get over complexion? Why are we still dealing with that? Why is that, again, 2017, why is that still an issue? Why is that still a point of division?
Mm-hmm.
Why?
We're feeding our lesser angels. Is that it? I mean, we're living a guttural existence. Is that what it is? Mm-hmm. I think that's what it is. In fact, I think that there are some people who take pleasure in being guttural. In other words, this takes us back to our title, or the title of our topic here, right? I think some people are obsessed with violence. Whether the violence is verbal violence, which leads to violence, or otherwise, right? I think you have people who really are just they want to be a guttural person.
But you have to understand that you have certain people that benefit from division. They benefit from us being violent toward one another. Mm-hmm. It completely works for them. It keeps them, their life cycle, and their family's life cycle going. Mm-hmm. It keeps them at the 1%. It keeps them being the elite. Okay. Because we cannot focus or get past something as simple as complexion to understand the real problem.
Sure. But you even have that issue within the African American community.
Oh, absolutely. Colorism is real, but it's real for
But hear me
other
out.
races.
But hear me out. Yeah, I'm making the same point here, right? Because this idea of colorism is not only existent within the African community, whether you're talking about the African American community or on the continent of Africa, where you have some persons bleaching their skin and so forth, right? Mm-hmm. Or in Jamaica, in the Caribbean and whatnot, or in India, right? I mean, I remember I teach. And I remember I was going over the lesson plan with my students one day in the speech class. And I was preparing them for the speech, and I had some students who were some international students, and it was a couple of young ladies from South Korea who were in my class. And the young lady made a very interesting confession. She said that in her, this is her, not me talking, this is her talking. Mm-hmm. She said that in her society, they favor lighter skin, right? Even though she was not the darkest person, right, that you would encounter, But she asserted this idea that in her community, in her nation, that people favor lighter complexion as opposed to darker complexion. And we're not talking about India, right? We're talking about South Korea, Candice. What do you think about that? What do you think about that?
I think one, that is a conversation that needs to be had.
Okay.
Because if you do not have the conversation, then you cannot change the situation.
Okay.
So one, we absolutely need to have the conversation.
Okay.
And then two, again, everything has been so colonized.
Okay.
To the point where if you do not have certain European features, then you will be hidden.
Yes. Okay.
And so it's an unfortunate, ugly truth that, mm-hmm. and I think that what happens is we get so wrapped up in our own communities that we forget that this happens in other communities. This happens in other areas. Mm-hmm. I remember being younger, and when I found out, because when you see, and again, whoever controls the media and mm-hmm. outlets and things of that nature, they mm-hmm. have the ability to control your outlook on life.
Absolutely.
And I remember when I found out that there were darker skinned people in other areas, I was like, well, whoa, why is that we never see them? Uh-huh. Why is it they're never on TV, they're never represented?
Sure, absolutely.
And so it's a global problem. I think colonization is a global issue.
Bingo. I think that it's part and parcel of the system of racism, white supremacy, right? Which I think is a direct relationship to the fact that the European powers have been the dominant power source for the last, what would you say, easily 500 years? Certainly since the day of Christopher Columbus, whereby Europeans were looking to expand their reach, if you will, in search of the new world and whatnot. So I say at least easily for the past 500 years.
We do have some viewers that have tuned in on YouTube, so welcome. Feel free to comment and join in the conversation. We do want to remind you, you can give us a call live in the studio as well, 810-259-9789, 810-259-9789.
Yeah. I think that I agree with you. I think it's a byproduct of the system of racism and white supremacy, not only in America, but globally, right? And it's impacting not only people of color, if you will, but also people of European descent as well, right? So it's a vicious cycle, if you will, right? So which takes us back to our idea of violence. Right? And America's obsession with violence. Why does America appear to be a nation that is so obsessed with violence?
Because
why is that?
I think another thing is, you had to go with me, it's kind of a little higher of a thought process here, but I think also that you have a little bit of a reap what you sow principle, a little bit of a karma principle, a little bit of a you cannot have as much blood that was spilled on this land and it not come back to you principle.
Okay, I see what you're saying on that.
Yeah.
Because we have to talk about the Native American, right?
You have to look at the foundation of which the country was built. Could it just be that we're going off of the way we were built to begin with?
It's karma, huh? What comes around goes around. So we have to deal with the genocide of Native Americans, the enslavement of Africans, what happened to us, right, as we were ripped from the breast of Mother Africa and brought over here, and then dominated socially, politically, and economically, and otherwise. So there's no way that we could that a nation can give out that kind of karma and not have it revisit itself.
You cannot have hundreds of years of trauma and then all of a sudden decide we'll just ignore it. You cannot. That trauma has to be dealt with. It has to be spoken to.
Okay.
It has to be in some way reconciled. That is reality.
Let me ask you a question, though. Where are we in terms of reconciliation here?
I don't know. You're not getting your 40 acres and a mule. So you got to figure something else out.
So I get the fact that people have this quest for power. You're going to always have persons who want power. They want to dominate things. They want to run the show, if you will. They want to lead the parade.
Right.
But you also you have voices like your Dr. Kings who preach a message of love and reconciliation. So how does that mesh with this violent American land space, which appears to have a love affair with violence, and the weapon of choice is the gun? What about that? In fact, how did that play itself out in the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement and the broader society as well, beyond the black community, with regard to the message of reconciliation, of love, of peace, and wholeness? How do we get to that place, Candice? What do you think? How do we get there?
Man, that is one of those questions that there's no one simple answer. There's no one simple thing. I think that we have to just, obviously self-examination has to happen.
Yes.
I think we have to figure out, what does reconciliation look like for me? What does reconciliation look like for my community? And then I think the next thing that we have to look at, just like we have generations that were brought up, slavery, that were brought up, civil rights era, things of that nature, that were brought up on the off end of it, I'll say the bad end of it.
Yes.
And you have people that were brought up on what looked like the more prosperous end of it.
Yes.
And so now you have to keep in mind that you have a mindset of people who do not recognize their privilege.
Okay.
And then you have some who absolutely recognize their privilege and are not willing to give it up.
Okay.
So we have to deal with all of those different factors.
So how do we get there? Because now the American landscape is very contentious. It's very contentious, right?
It's hard to talk around here these days.
Any way you cut it, absolutely. Yeah. So how do we get there? Because even though you have some people who decry the methods of Donald Trump, I think in the back room they're like, good, you can say it. I can't say that, but what do you think? What do you think?
Absolutely. absolutely have that, because if you didn't have that, then he wouldn't be able to say that. Let's be clear.
Okay.
That although you do not have people who are outright going yay, 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 they're also sitting back like, well, he's president, knowing good and well that we're coming from another person of another color. They go, this is racist. This is you're dividing the country. This is X, Y, Z.
Yes.
So let's be clear
Okay.
that those people exist, and as a matter of fact, they're awfully happy to have him walk the plank by himself, if you will. But at the same time, it's like, we're going to cheer on these ideas until they make us take him out of power.
Wow, that's a great point. That's a great point. But again, and maybe this is more of a rhetorical question than anything else, because I can't say, well, I'm a man of faith, so I can't say that I don't see any end to this. I can't say that as a man of faith. I can't say that, right? But the question is, how do we get from point A to point B? How do we get to living in this very contentious land space whereby school shootings appear to be on the rise? You have persons who walk into a grade school, if you will, and will mow down innocent children and their teachers. The same thing happens in high schools. It happens from time to time at colleges. Even in churches, is no place safe. Even as you enter into the house of prayer, you have gunmen who have entered recently into specific churches. Need I remind our viewers and listeners of what happened in South Carolina when that deranged young man walked into the AME church, the African Methodist Episcopal Church, I believe the name is Mother Emanuel, and was sitting in Bible study, right? And this guy mowed down 9 innocent people in cold, naked blood, with hopes of bringing about a bloodbath across the landscape, a racial war, if you will. So how do you deal with that? And even when you have situations like this happening, innocent people, innocent children being murdered, right? The NRA is still reigning supreme. What do you think about that? One would think that we would have a serious discussion, a serious dialogue about gun control, not the elimination of the gun. I'm not arguing that, right? But this idea of putting devices into place that would keep deranged people from being able to get their hands on guns, so to speak.
I hear you on that. And I think one of the things that we would have to deal with is the fact that you have people who, and if we just use what happened at the church,
yes, Mother Emanuel,
an example,
sure,
you have people who are still teaching a certain sick mindset. Children are still being brought up, brainwashed, if you will. It's kind of cultish. It's really weird.
Yes.
Into thinking that they're superior, that they're losing ground on something, and so first you have to deal with that mindset.
Yes.
You cannot allow certain groups to gather together and spew hate and then tell other groups, oh no, you can't protest, or we're going to try to take away your right to protest. I think that, again, there is such benefit in division for people who want to stay on top, for people who want to maintain the status quo, if you will. And so a lot of times they are not going to do anything, or they're going to be the ones to make sure that any pushback against that will not happen.
Yes, absolutely.
There's so much power in that division, and I think even those who are brainwashed to believe that there is an elite race of people, even though they are in huge danger, and they don't even recognize that they are in huge danger. But at the same time, they are a huge danger to society.
Yes.
And so we need to deal with that. Yes. While we're making FBI profiles of extremists, we need to make FBI profiles of the real extremists, of the real terrorists. We need to call a terrorist a terrorist, even when it's domestic. We need to be honest with ourselves.
Yes.
We need to call a murderer a murderer.
Okay.
That's just reality.
Yes.
We need to call a thing as opposed to giving an excuse. We need to stop giving evil a mental illness pass, because it's not fair to people who actually have mental illnesses.
Yes. True.
Evil is real.
True. No doubt about that. No doubt about that.
It
Absolutely.
is. And we have to stop giving it a mental illness pass.
Yes. Huh. So I'm noticing this strain, this thread, if you will, that you're weaving in the conversation. And what I'm thinking of is this statement here. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So who are we? As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So my question then is, who are we? Well, who are we, Candice? And when I say that, I'm not just talking about you and I, right? But I'm making reference to our society. Who are we? Just who are we? Right? If human beings are the sum total of their thoughts and their ideas, who are we?
We are in trouble if that is the
who are we?
The thought process.
Yeah, but who are we? Really? With everything that we've said thus far, who are we? Who are we? What kind of mindset do we have?
I think if you wanted to give a surface answer, and keep in mind I'm saying this is a
Let's go deep. Let's go to the root. Let's go to the root.
First, if you want to give a surface answer.
The quick answer, huh?
A surface answer, it would be so easy to just say, well, we're savages who want control.
Okay.
That would be the easiest thing.
Okay.
But as we peel back the layers on some things, I think in a lot of cases we are people who do not recognize their power. We are people who do not recognize their oneness. I think that it's so many different things that we are, but for some reason we tend to lean toward the negative.
And why is that? Why is that? Why do we lean towards the negative? Now, I know theologically what I could say is the depravity of man, right? And certainly I think there's merit in that argument that as a species, we are depraved when you look at our spiritual, social, political, economic state, whatnot, and how we engage one another. In other words, Dr. King would put it this way: it's man's inhumanity to man. When will it end? When will it end? What do you think?
I think the most dangerous answer to that is it'll end when man ends.
Oh my goodness. And that's very possible, because right now we're on the brink of a thermonuclear war, even as we speak. Right now, you have two men who are dueling one against the other. One being Donald Trump, the president of the United States, and Kim Jong-un, right, the president of North Korea. So we're right there on the cusp of a possible thermonuclear war. So it's not even about nonviolence versus violence.
And that's another thing.
It's about non-existence.
But that's another thing too. When you have these people in charge, it's like
maybe we ought to put them in a boxing ring and have them duke it out with some gloves on. Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un.
No, I think they need to go straight old school. Somebody slap somebody with a glove, challenge the other one to a duel, and y'all shoot each other.
That's right.
Because it's like, why are we? You're gonna have the death of millions and millions of innocent people because of your ego.
Yes.
Make that make sense.
There you go. So what do we do, Candice? What do we do? What do we do?
Well, I don't know. You know, in other countries there are different rules, but I think in America, we open our eyes and choose wisely.
Do we? Are we?
You said, what do we do? Not what are we doing?
Yes.
I was answering what do we do?
Yeah. Are we being wise, though?
No.
How do we get wise, though? Or become wise?
You have to deal with tough issues. You have to have tough conversations. It is hard to say to yourself that, yes, I benefit from other people being oppressed. And no, I don't really want to give that up.
I've looked in the mirror.
Yes.
There's that mirror again.
Yes.
I've looked in the mirror and the enemy that I'm seeking is staring me back in my face.
Yes.
It is I.
Yes.
But do we do that often?
No.
It's easier to point the finger at somebody else.
It's easier for me to see the speck in your eye.
Hello.
It's easier for me to see the speck in your eye.
Rather than the
mote in my own.
Oh my goodness. I think you said something.
It's easy.
I think you said something. So which way? King we'll put it this way. Which way, America? Right? Which way? Because of course, King was conveying this idea of the beloved community. And you're a woman of faith. I'm a man of faith, right? And really that's what he was talking about. He was making reference to the Christian, the Judeo-Christian love ethic. That's really what he was making reference to, this idea of the beloved community. But so who would be the agents of change in that regard? If we don't mind being theological for a couple of minutes here. Since you are a woman of faith and I'm a man of faith, what do you think? What is the beloved community doing right now then to affect change in our landscape?
You would be your own change agent. Because I think the same thing as far as the church, as far as like what we keep saying with the government of, you know, you the people have the right to demand XYZ. I think it's the same thing with the church. I think oftentimes people forget, and this is no knock to pastors and bishops and all that.
Sure, absolutely.
Don't call me, don't text
No
me.
doubt, no doubt.
Don't.
Because you're already a Marxist. You're already a pinko commie. You know that, right?
Boy, I tell you. Freedom of speech. It's not free. You can say whatever you want, but you will be labeled. Right. I got you. Whatever. But I think it's the same thing of there has to be a requirement for those who are saying they're preacher, teacher, leader.
Yes,
Same thing. There has to be a requirement. What are you doing within our communities? What are you doing for our communities? Do you come? Do you get the money for tithes and offering and go back to wherever you're going?
Watch out there, Candice.
It's the same thing.
Watch out there. Watch out. Watch out, man.
Or are you building schools? Are you building banking systems?
Oh my goodness.
Are you making a change? Are you doing these things? Are you stepping foot into the actual communities in which your congregation lives?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it we all meet at this building on Sunday, we all meet at this building on Wednesday, we'll have a special dinner once a year, and we won't actually do anything outside of these walls?
Wow. Let me be the advocate here, right? And I hear your point, because many people make that argument, right? But what about the members?
I said it's on us. The way I said that, the same way we have a requirement of our government, and that we have to be educated and informed, it's the same way. Whatever your belief is, you have a responsibility to yourself to be informed and educated in your belief.
So you're talking about the preacher, the deacon, the missionary, the member, the Christian.
Anybody that steps foot inside that church.
The man, the woman. And keep it with your theme about the mirror.
If we simply just say Christians and we're saying Christ, then the Bible tells you to study to show thyself approved.
Right.
So
that's
when you need to study, you need to do those
absolutely.
things for yourself as well. It can't just be he's talking to me for 45 minutes from a pulpit.
Yes.
I mean, that's cool.
To what end? To what end?
What do you mean?
No. That question is alluding to action, the importance of action, of being actively involved and engaged in the community.
Yes.
Right? Because the people of God are we not? The Bible makes reference to us being the salt and the light, right? The light of the world, and we are to be used like salt, because salt is what? It preserves life.
Right.
Are we preserving life? No, really, that's in keeping with our question here. We're talking about America's obsession with violence. What is the religious community's response to that, to the violence that's ensuing in American society?
Vic's trying to get me in trouble.
No, I'm not. You know,
the response is prayer.
And I believe in prayer. Prayer is powerful.
Believe in prayer, but I also believe that we were all given a purpose, and you need to move,
exercise our faith, huh?
Yes.
So are we being the advocates of change from a biblical perspective as a community of faith, as we're engaging the American land space?
Vic, you're not gonna get me in trouble.
Oh no, we're just having a conversation. Look, Candice, this is just me and you talking. We're having we're having a conversation here.
Right.
They just happen to be listening in a little bit. That's all. That's all. But what do you think?
No, I have the same opinion with that as I have with just regular everyday people in government.
Okay.
We could be doing more.
Okay.
I think that you cannot solely put a responsibility on someone to do for you, to say for you, to move for you. At some point, you have to do for yourself. You have your own gifts, your own talents, your own everything. You need to bring that to the table. If we're still saying in terms of Christians and Christ, we're saying we're a body. We can't all be the behind and sit down. We can't.
I'm gonna remember that quote.
We can't.
I'm gonna remember that quote.
I'm just saying. Somebody's gotta be the legs and walk.
No doubt.
We have to.
Yes. Wow. So, but you see, you see what happened to our dear brother Dr. King. He stood up. He spoke out for many years. And what happened to him? What happened to him?
He is not the first person to die for freedom.
Oh, but that's a high cost.
I said die. He's not the first person to be murdered for freedom.
That's a high cost, though.
Freedom costs.
You know what I've heard people make this argument, right?
But you remember the one speech he gave?
He
even said in one of his speeches, he was like, I want to live just like you want to live.
Absolutely.
But he wanted to live free.
Yes, true. That's true.
So I don't think anybody goes into it wanting to die, but they do go into it wanting to be free.
Yes.
They do go into it wanting equality. They do go into it wanting the equity. They go into it wanting everything that you would want for your child, they want for their children. And I don't think it's fair. I know it's not fair to have a segment of the population believe that my children should have good schools, while another segment of the population is being told we don't owe you a quality education.
Yes.
I do not think it is fair for one segment of the population to have gated communities and be safe and quick police response time, while another segment of the population 3 days later and the police still have not shown up.
3 days later.
Listen, I'm just saying. I don't think that is fair. I don't think it's fair that we cut revenue sharing in some areas and give it to other areas. I don't think it's fair that we treat life as a business. And if you are not the bigger corporation, but rather the mom and pop store, that we will not look after you, we will not see about you. And so I do not think it's radical to want those things for your children, to want them to have an education, to want them to have good economic standing, to want them to live in safe neighborhoods. There is nothing radical about that. That's common sense. That's life.
Okay.
We all deserve, there's nothing radical about wanting clean, safe, affordable water. There's nothing radical about that. So when people say things such as, oh, that's a radical mindset. No, that's a tool for them to make you be quiet and you speak even louder.
Wow.
There's nothing radical about those things.
Well, with that having been said, we're still being theological here, right? Here's a statement that King used to make, right? He would talk about the Zeitgeist, as it relates to the civil rights movement. And according to King, the Zeitgeist referred to the spirit of the times. And he was saying that essentially he and his cohorts who were actively involved and engaged in the civil rights movement were being tracked down by the spirit of the times. So there was something greater than them, something beyond them, which was challenging them and prompting them to become active agents of change in the American land space. So now let's fast forward from 1968 to 2017. What are the spirit of the times today, and what is the spirit of the time requiring of us who would be the potential agents of change?
You want to know what is really weird about the time we live in right now?
What's that?
It's like you can say whatever you want, yet you can't say anything at all.
Explain that.
Meaning, how can I explain it? Of the sense of I can go give a speech about white supremacy at a college, but then at the same time, I can't say certain things in other areas. It's I'm not doing a very good job of explaining what I mean by that, but it's just like we are free to say everything, yet we are free to say nothing. Because it's in a time where, well, why can't they say this? Or everybody's being too sensitive. And there's another time where we got to play to that sensitivity because you shouldn't say that. We're in that kind of a weird space.
It's a non-era. That's what Gil Scott-Heron would say, right? For you old heads out there. the renowned jazz musician, the poet, right? Gil Scott-Heron, who made his political commentary, of course, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, etc. But he was making reference to that actually on one of his songs, and he was calling that particular time period, the 70s, a non-era compared to the 60s. So what is 2017 versus 1968? Is 2017 a non-era in that regard? I'm trying to link that up with the statement you just got through making. You can say certain things, but you can't say certain things, right? What do you think?
No, I think in the 60s they were free to say quite a few things with no fear.
How did they get there, though? Because they had to burst forth out of...
Oh, you mean on the other end. Okay, I thought you meant...
They had to burst forth, right? Because think about it. In the 1930s, 40s, 50s, right, prior to the beginning of the civil rights movement as we now know it, the American land space really had a social order that had people in certain places. There was social stratification which occurred racially, socially, economically. It was an apartheid system. To be honest with you, it was the American form of apartheid. You stay over there, and I'll stay over here, and never shall the two meet in the middle. So then the question is, what caused those brothers and sisters and other persons who join in to break out of that cage, right? To burst through the apartheid system that existed on every plane of existence.
I think you have to have enough people in agreement with the fact that we no longer want this system.
So now we're talking about, once again, King's assertion of the Zeitgeist, the spirit of the times, because when we look at what was taking place here, which called forth the civil rights movement, there were independence movements, liberation movements taking place in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia and whatnot. There were oppressed people all across the world who were standing up and speaking out. They got out of their prescribed place. What do you think? So really, I think they were being compelled to action by something that was greater than themselves.
Yeah, I think that sometimes when I guess people have to decide that oppression is unbearable. They have to decide that what is happening now is more uncomfortable.
Yes,
it's more. They just have to get to a point where they cannot find comfort in it, where they cannot.
Fannie Lou Hamer put it this way: I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. Fannie Lou Hamer popularized that statement. A great hero of the civil rights movement. Yes. Fannie Lou Hamer, no question about that. One of the most powerful orators and freedom fighters that we produce.
Somehow we have gotten to 5:57 p.m.
It's about that time?
It is about that time. I do want to, before we get off the air, if you're in the Flint, Michigan area tomorrow from 4 to 6 p.m., the Flint Development Center is hosting the King Avenue Festival of Lights. You'll be able to take some pictures with that guy in the red suit. You'll be able to get some cocoa, some cider, do some hay riding.
All right.
And then at 6 p.m. there will be a ceremonial tree lighting that'll take place. Yes. The Flint Development Center is located at 4121 Martin Luther King Avenue in Flint, Michigan. It's the old Bunch School for those who are not familiar. Yes. And so I believe from one end of MLK to another end of MLK, they'll have some trees that will be...
Will they?
Yes, it'll be a nice, bright, shiny street. And I think that's a beautiful, beautiful addition to the Flint's North End, once again.
Will the fertility bunny be there, too?
I don't know.
Well, that's a different holiday, huh? The fertility bunny?
That is. You see what Vic is doing here? I'm just trying to announce
along with good old Saint
Avenue
Nick
Festival of Lights from 4 to 6 p.m. tomorrow. I don't know what he's doing. But we do want to thank you all for tuning in to another edition of Whose Opinion Is It Anyway with Candice
and Victor.
And we invite you to tune in every single Friday evening from 5 to 6 p.m. You can catch us live. You can catch us live on YouTube, catch us live on Facebook. 5 to 6 a.m. Friday mornings. Catch a recap of what you may have missed. And once again, we'll be back here in the studio live again next week. 92.1 FM WFOV. And see you next week.
Salute to continua.
Your mics are still hot.